How can we travel back in time? Is there a time machine? Yes, it's DNA. It's ancient DNA. We are stealing genetic secrets of the past. When I look at this place, I see one huge cold storage room for ancient DNA.
In recent years, the field of ancient DNA research has been uncovering astonishing narratives about our deep past. Stories that challenge long-held assumptions. Through painstaking laboratory work, scientists are now able to reach across millennia and read the genetic code of people who lived long before any written history in the Americas. One of the most provocative and unsettling discoveries is the emergence of a previously unknown human lineage in ancient Colombia, one that bears no close genetic ties to the known Native American populations. The remnants of this lineage vanish entirely from the gene pool, leaving only cryptic traces in a DNA sequence. In this video, we will dive deep into the surprising revelation of this lost lineage, explore how it reshapes our understanding of migration into the Americas, and consider the many mysteries it leaves behind. We will break the story into clear segments: background, the DNA evidence, migration models, possible fates, and the broader implications. For generations, the accepted story of how humans first reached the Americas seemed almost settled. Scholars believed that a single population of ancient travelers crossed from Siberia into Alaska over the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age. These early migrants, moving southward through the Americas, were thought to be the ancestors of every Native American group known today. Over time, this model evolved with new evidence, allowing for coastal migration routes, long stays in the frozen expanse of Beringia, and even smaller waves of later migration. But the core belief held firm. All indigenous peoples of the Americas ultimately shared one ancestral origin. That foundation has now been shaken by a discovery deep in the Colombian Andes, where ancient DNA recovered from human remains tells a story that doesn't fit anywhere in that familiar lineage. The discovery emerged from the Bogotá Altiplano, a high plateau surrounded by mountains in present-day Colombia. Archaeologists have long known this region for its pre-ceramic sites, ancient communities that lived by hunting and gathering long before the use of pottery or agriculture. For decades, these sites were studied primarily through tools, bones, and the faint traces of shelters. But the tropical climate made it nearly impossible to preserve ancient DNA. That began to change with advances in excavation and molecular techniques. From soil once thought too warm and too humid to yield genetic secrets, researchers finally managed to extract usable DNA from human skeletal remains more than 6,000 years old. These individuals lived thousands of years before the rise of the later Herrera culture that dominated the area. When their DNA was sequenced, scientists expected to find the familiar genetic signatures that tie ancient peoples of the Americas to their descendants today. Instead, what they found was something completely outside any known pattern, a genetic signature that simply didn't fit anywhere in the family tree of Native American ancestry. The laboratory results stunned the research team. They began by extracting mitochondrial DNA, which traces maternal ancestry, and Y chromosome markers, which trace paternal lines. They also managed to recover fragments of autosomal DNA, genetic material inherited from both parents, which provides a fuller picture of ancestry. When these markers were compared to ancient and modern DNA samples from across North, Central, and South America, the Colombian samples stood apart. They didn't align with the major Native American branches identified through decades of genetic research. In the phylogenetic trees that map human relationships, this lineage formed its own isolated branch, one that diverged before or independently from all other known groups. This wasn't just an outlier or a distant cousin. The data suggested that these individuals represented an entirely distinct human population, one that had either arrived in the Americas through a separate migration or diverged so early that its descendants vanished from the record. Scientists began referring to it as a ghost lineage, an echo of a people who once lived and disappeared, leaving no clear trace in any modern DNA. Statistical modeling placed their divergence thousands of years before the established founding population of the Americas, but the exact timing remains uncertain. What is clear is that this group's genetic makeup cannot be explained by simple mixing or drift. It reflects a different origin altogether. That realization carries enormous implications. For decades, the narrative of the peopling of the Americas rested on a relatively unified ancestry, shaped by one or two initial migrations. But here was evidence of a population that stood apart, one that did not contribute to the genetic makeup of modern Native Americans. The absence of any detectable overlap means this lineage either vanished entirely or was absorbed so completely that no measurable trace remains. Both possibilities are unsettling. If they disappeared, what happened to them? Were they replaced by later groups migrating into the region, or did environmental or social changes erase them from history? And if their DNA was blended away through generations of intermixing, how did that process occur without leaving even a faint genetic signal behind? These questions push archaeologists and geneticists to reconsider how they define the first Americans. The assumption that all indigenous peoples stem from a single founding population now seems too narrow. Instead, the early human story in the Americas may have been far more complex, a mosaic of migrations, some successful, others extinguished before history began. Each vanished lineage represents a lost chapter in the human journey across continents. The Columbian discovery suggests that more such chapters might still lie buried in tropical soils and forgotten caves, waiting to challenge what we think we know. Beyond genetics, the find also reshapes how scientists think about ancient human movement. It implies that different groups may have reached the Americas by varying routes, perhaps at different times, through coastal paths, or even earlier migrations before the main wave that crossed Beringia. If so, some of these pioneering populations may have failed to survive long-term or were displaced by later arrivals. This aligns with archaeological hints of early and diverse human presence across the continent, sites in Brazil, Chile, and North America that date earlier than expected and show unfamiliar tool traditions. Each of these finds once seemed anomalous. Now they may belong to a wider story of early, forgotten migrations. The Bogota lineage serves as a stark reminder of how fragile human history can be. Entire peoples can vanish, leaving behind nothing but bones and fragments of DNA buried in the soil. The silence surrounding their disappearance is haunting. No oral traditions, no cultural artifacts that survived the millennia. Just genetic whispers of a separate beginning. For scientists, the discovery is exhilarating. But for those who contemplate what it means, it's chilling. It suggests that the peopling of the Americas wasn't a single triumph of migration and adaptation, but a complex web of arrivals, extinctions, and forgotten legacies. As technology advances, the boundaries of what can be uncovered in ancient remains continue to expand. Each new find rewrites part of the story, showing that the past was never as simple as the models once claimed. The lost lineage of Columbia adds a profound dimension to that unfolding mystery. Proof that even in the most studied continents, there are still secrets waiting beneath the ground, and that the true story of humanity's spread across the Americas may be far older, more intricate, and more haunting than anyone imagined. The discovery of a vanished genetic lineage in ancient Columbia continues to unsettle researchers and expand the mystery of how the Americas were first settled. After uncovering remains that carried no genetic link to any known Native American ancestry, scientists began to explore how such an isolated group could have arrived in South America at all. Several migration scenarios have been proposed, each offering a glimpse into a past that seems far more intricate than anyone had imagined. One possibility is that this group represented a very early wave of migration across the Bering Land Bridge, one that predated or ran parallel to the ancestors of modern indigenous populations. If true, these travelers may have moved during a brief window when ice and sea conditions allowed passage into the New World. They could have followed paths later erased by climate shifts or replaced by subsequent migrations. Another idea suggests that they might have taken a coastal route, traveling by land and sea along the Pacific Rim, perhaps using islands and coves as stepping stones before venturing inland into South America. Such seafaring routes, though difficult to prove, could explain how a small, genetically distinct population found itself in the Andean highlands. A third theory considers the possibility of multiple migration pulses. Instead of one great movement of people into the continent, there may have been several waves, some of which left a lasting genetic imprint, while others disappeared entirely. The Columbian lineage might be the last trace of one such forgotten migration. There is also the idea of isolation and local evolution. After reaching the highlands, this group could have become separated from other populations for thousands of years, evolving independently in the mountain valleys. Over time, genetic drift and environmental pressures could have shaped a unique lineage that remained distinct until its disappearance. Finally, though less supported, some researchers have speculated about back migration, movements of people from South America toward the north, or limited gene flow in both directions. While evidence for this remains uncertain, such complexity highlights that human movement across the continent was likely far from linear. Whatever the case, this lost lineage represents one more thread in an intricate web of migrations and disappearances that shaped early human presence in the Americas. The question of what happened to this mysterious group is even more haunting. If their genetic signal left no trace in modern populations, it means their story ended in near total silence. Several explanations attempt to make sense of this disappearance. One is complete demographic replacement. A later wave of migrants, perhaps associated with the rise of the Herrera culture, known for its ceramic technology, could have moved into the region in larger numbers. With more advanced tools, social structures, or agricultural techniques, they may have absorbed or displaced the earlier inhabitants until none remained. Another possibility is gradual assimilation. Over generations, this ancient group might have intermarried with newcomers, their genes blending until they became undetectable by modern methods. The remnants of their DNA could lie buried below statistical thresholds, hidden in genomes dominated by later arrivals. Other factors could have contributed as well. Disease and environmental stress are powerful forces in human history. A shift in climate, a decline in game, or the spread of pathogens introduced by new groups might have devastated small, isolated communities. Once population numbers fell below a sustainable threshold, extinction would follow quickly. Migration away from the Bogotá Plateau remains another possible outcome. If environmental conditions worsened, they might have abandoned the region entirely, moving to areas where their remains have yet to be discovered. It is also conceivable that they remained in place but underwent cultural transformation, adopting the identity, technologies, and genetic makeup of incoming groups. No single hypothesis has yet to be confirmed, and the true cause may have involved a combination of these forces. The unsettling reality is that an entire human population, once thriving in the Andean highlands, vanished without leaving a clear genetic echo in anyone alive today. The implications of this finding reach far beyond Colombia. For decades, researchers believed the peopling of the Americas followed a relatively simple pattern, but this ghost lineage forces a rethinking of that model. The Americas now appear to have been home to a diversity of groups, some of which endured while others disappeared completely. This challenges the idea of a single founding population. Instead, early settlement may have involved overlapping migrations, independent origins, and regional extinctions. The Colombian case also opens the door to the concept of other ghost populations, extinct lineages that have yet to be discovered. As ancient DNA research expands across Central and South America, more of these hidden ancestries could emerge, further fragmenting the neat story once taught about early human movement. Such discoveries remind scientists to approach conclusions with caution. The presence of ancient remains in a region does not automatically guarantee genetic continuity with the people living there thousands of years later. Entire populations can be replaced, and regions can experience total genetic turnover. This realization forces archaeologists and geneticists to look beyond DNA alone. To truly understand these vanished peoples, researchers must integrate evidence from archaeology, environmental data, and isotopic analysis, examining what they ate, how they moved, and how they interacted with neighboring groups. Only then can a fuller picture emerge. These findings also carry ethical weight. They touch on the identities and ancestral narratives of indigenous communities today. Researchers must handle such data with sensitivity, recognizing that every genetic discovery intersects with living traditions and collective memory. Yet despite the progress, enormous challenges remain. Ancient DNA research in tropical and mountainous environments faces severe limitations. Heat, humidity, and soil acidity destroy DNA over time, leaving only fragments, if anything at all. This means much of the genetic record across the continent is still invisible. The few samples that do survive may not represent the full diversity of early populations, creating an unavoidable sampling bias. The Colombian lineage might not be unique. It may simply be the first of many lost groups waiting to be uncovered. There are also uncertainties in calculating when these populations diverged. Mutation rates are statistical estimates, and small shifts in these numbers can move timelines by thousands of years. Moreover, extremely low levels of genetic input from extinct groups could exist in modern genomes but remain masked by subsequent admixture or drift. With current methods, these traces could be impossible to detect. Another unresolved issue is connecting genetics to culture. DNA can tell us about ancestry, but not about language, rituals, or belief systems. Two populations could share a genetic signature and live entirely different lives. Or, conversely, be genetically unrelated yet share cultural traits. Without careful archaeological correlation, the genetic data alone can mislead. And there is always the possibility that the distinct lineage discovered in Colombia does not represent a completely separate migration at all, but a branch of diversity that has not yet been sampled elsewhere. Until more comparative data emerge, the debate remains open. What is undeniable is that the Colombian discovery has cracked open a deeper mystery about the human past. It reveals a forgotten population, isolated for millennia, that vanished so completely it left only faint molecular traces in ancient bones. Its story challenges the established narrative of the first Americans, suggesting a far older and more fragmented human presence than anyone had dared to imagine. Each new discovery may bring more questions than answers, but it also draws us closer to understanding the haunting truth. The Americas were once home to people whose existence has been erased from memory. Their only surviving voice carried through fragments of ancient DNA, whispering from the earth. Thank you for watching. If you found this topic intriguing, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps. Let me know in the comments what you think the fate of this lost lineage might have been. If you want to see more deep dives into ancient DNA, cryptic migrations, or vanished peoples, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. Until next time, keep questioning what we think we know about our past, and stay curious.